What is up, everybody? Happy Easter! Happy Easter, and welcome to our online YouTube channel where every single week we put up content, specifically the messages that we're giving to our youth group so you don't miss out on a single thing that we're doing here. All right, now before we start, I want you to copy that link at the top, the URL. I want you to share it, send it to one of your friends, and say, watch this with me right now because we're about to hear something so good. Now, I'm very excited about tonight's message. I'm excited about this new series that we're starting. This next series is going to be a 6 to 7 week series leading up to a secret project that we've been working on called, I'll tell you at the end. I don't want to spoil anything too soon, too quick, but some really awesome things to be looking forward to within our student ministries at CCV, okay? But before we start, I need to ask you a very simple question, and that is, what are you a die-hard fan of? Like, what in your life are you so gung-ho about that you love it so much and you will fight to the death to defend that thing because you just love it so much? Go ahead and let us know in the comments below. What are you a die-hard fan of? Now, not just what are you a die-hard fan of, but you could also be a die-hard fan of, like, against something, right? Something that you're so totally against that you just dislike so much. Not that we're promoting any of that. Oh, I hate this, I don't like this, but what are you either for or against in a die-hard kind of motion? Like for me, for instance, I believe that Peeps, the very famous the very famous marshmallow candy around Easter time, is possibly the most worst thing ever associated with the topic of Easter. Now, yes, Easter, we're celebrating the life and the resurrection of Jesus, and on the contrast, nothing makes me want to die quicker than the idea of having to eat a Peep. It is just so gross. I remember eating one at a young age. It made me vom, and it's traumatic for me, okay? I hate it. I will never be for Peeps. They're terrible. Come at me if you disagree. I also am a diehard fan against Christmas music, or specifically, Frosty, Red Noses, and an old guy who's only friends with elves and reindeer. That kind of music should never, ever be within sound distance of our ears prior to December. Like, I'm not even talking right after Thanksgiving. Give us a day or two to mourn Thanksgiving being over with all the food and the joyfulness and the thankfulness. Let us have that time before you shove Frosty and Santa in our face. I will never be a fan of it. Absolutely ever. Something I am a fan of, though, and I'm a diehard fan against, and I'm ready to be hated in the comments, let me know. I think Chipotle is the best, by far, fast food, Tex-Mex kind of place out there. Way better than Qdoba, and don't get me started on Moe's, okay? Seriously, come at me in the comments if you disagree, but Chipotle all the way. I will pay forever millions of dollars just for a couple extra scoops of guac, okay? I also am a diehard fan of a show that I believe is one of the greatest of all times, and there's a reason that it's 41st season. You heard that right, a 41st season is coming up. The show Survivor is one of the greatest social experiments ever to be broadcasted on TV, in the history just in general. It's absolutely incredible, and I will defend that to the day I die. Now again, I want to ask you, what are you a diehard fan of or against, and to let me know in the comments. Now, the reason I'm asking you this specific question is I want you to start reflectively thinking, why are you a diehard fan of or against one thing? What got you into being a fan? And what I'm most interested in is, how are you as a fan or a supporter of that thing? What I mean by this more specifically is, how do you naturally respond when you are personally behind something you believe in? How do you respond? What I mean by this is, does it bother you when other people are not on the same page as you? And how do you respond when somebody disrespects what it is that you're so very much for? Like, how do you actually respond? Not what do you think, how do you physically, verbally, emotionally, spiritually, mentally respond to that thing? I'm able to respond. Get that? I'm able to respond, and depending on what the actual subject is, I even have a responsibility to respond in some way. And that's exactly why we're starting this series called Responsible, where we're looking at some incredible statements that Jesus made while he was here on earth. These statements are the 7 I am statements, where Jesus tells us who he is. And the reason that he's saying these specific statements is because one of the most common questions people ask us when it comes to faith is, who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Who is this guy? And we are meant to know who he is so that we can tell him. We're meant to have a response, okay? When Jesus was walking in Matthew 5, I believe, when he was walking, or Matthew 6, when he was walking with his disciples, he stopped everything that was going on and he looked at him and he said, who do people say that I am? It's a common question. I need you to know who I am. Not just what other people say, but who would you say that I am? It's so important for us to know who Jesus is so that we can always have a response for who he is. So as Jesus gives us these 7 statements that we're going to be talking about over the next 6 to 7 weeks throughout the series, we need to ask ourselves, is the life of Jesus and these statements something that we just shrug off and mentally say, yeah, I heard that before? Or is there a way that you and I should respond to them? How about when we respond when others ask us these questions? And that's what we're diving into tonight. And with it being Easter, I find it the perfect time to look at one of the 7 I am statements. And to give you a little context, this is the story of Jesus, Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. Okay? Now, if you've been around church at all, you may have heard the story, but if not, that's totally fine. Long story short, Mary and Martha are with their brother Lazarus, who becomes very sick and ultimately dies. Spoiler alert, it's going to be okay. So Lazarus dies, and he's dead for 4 days. For 4 days, he's dead. And I want to read to you kind of the context. I don't want to just give you, a SparkNote summary. I want to read to you what the actual Bible says. This is John 11, 17 through 22. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb, once again, for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. Now, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. But Mary stayed at the home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Now I want you to recognize something. I want you to recognize what Mary says and what she does. She expresses her frustration, right? Jesus, I wish you were here. I wish you heard me. I wish you had been here when I needed you. And I think a lot of you and I feel the same sometimes. And whenever we get frustrated with the situation, we express that and then we stop. We say, Jesus, you should have. Jesus, I wish you did. Jesus, you didn't. And we kind of cut Jesus off, right? But look how Mary continues to respond. She says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Verse 22, but I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. You see, Mary knows that even though she feels lost, Jesus is still who he is. He is still Lord. She responds not just with how she feels, but with the truth of who Jesus is. And this is so crucial for this series. It's when you respond with the truth that you actually experience truth. You see, something that I wish I knew at your age is that God is not limited by your perception of him. God has unlimited power and knowledge, and he is ready to have a relationship with us. And sometimes we're so consumed by our situation that we're so misunderstanding of who he is that we just make these assumptions. We just assume that he's out far and about, not caring about our situation at all. We assume that he's so unaware of what's going on that he could care less. And again, we just stop there. That's our feeling and our frustration. But what does Martha do? She feels that, but she continues by saying, but I know that even now. She still acknowledges who he is. Mary says, I'm hurt, but more than that, she responds with an awareness of who Jesus is. And I want to ask you, how do you respond with faith in the middle of pain? Is God closer or further than he's ever been? Is God closer to you or further from you than he's ever been when you're in the middle of pain? See, there's only one answer to that, but your perception of him will change your experience of him in that situation. Because with that faith, the faith that Martha displayed, I want you to see how Jesus responds in turn to her. John 16, 23 to 27, Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am, this is that statement, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. And 2 major things happen here, okay? Follow me. 2 major things happen here. When Martha responds with her feelings, she was heard, and she felt like she expressed it. And that's what a lot of us do. But again, like I said before, we typically stop there. When she responds with her feelings, she is heard by Jesus. We are heard by God when we express our pain. But when Martha continued to respond with the truth of who Jesus is, she then experienced that truth. When Martha spoke of the resurrection in faith, she experienced the literal resurrection of her brother Lazarus. I need to ask you, how do you respond when you're in crisis? With the truth of who Jesus is, or with who you wish he was? With the truth of what Jesus did for you and me on the cross, or what you wish he would have done for you in that situation? Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Literally and metaphorically, Jesus is saying that when a situation is over in your mind, like it was with Mary and Martha with Lazarus, speak truth of who Jesus is. Like when you are consumed with a situation, express your awareness of that situation, and then above that, pronounce the declaration of who Jesus is as the life and the resurrection of that situation. Yes, be honest with how you feel. Express that. Tell God what you're going through, but also be honest about who Jesus is and what resurrection means for that situation that you or a friend may be going through. I have one simple point, and I think this will be so critical for you as you continue to grow in your faith. Jesus responds to you, not your situation. Jesus responds to you, not your situation. I want you to think about a tough situation. I want you to think about whatever it is you may be going through. Jesus responds to you, not your situation. He is a relational being, not a situational fairy. See, Lazarus was dead for 4 days. When I realized this blew my mind. Lazarus was dead for 4 days. Let that sink in. It did not take Jesus 4 days to heal Lazarus. It took Martha 4 days to express who Jesus was in her situation. That's when the miracle happened. When she acknowledged not just how she felt, but who Jesus was, that is when she experienced the truth of who Jesus was in her physical life. So when you go through something, you will go through it. It will be tough. Jesus says this in John 16:33. You will be in doubt sometimes. Trusting Jesus doesn't make everything easy, but acknowledging Jesus does mean that he can bring life into that situation. He can resurrect that situation because he's not an on-call God to crisis. He's a relationally responsive being to truth. Hebrews 11:6 is one of my memorized verses. It says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. It is one of the callbacks of God. He responds to faith. He responds to people. He's not an on-call God to fix every little situation that goes on in our life. He's a relational being that responds to you. He's a relational being that responds to you. So when you learn to respond to your situation with Jesus being the resurrection and life of it, then regardless of the outcome, you are right where he is, and you see him for who he is, not for who you wish he was. So this week, whatever you're going through, I want to challenge you. I'm sure it's tough. I know it's not easy. But can you say that Jesus is the resurrection and life of that situation? Can you respond in the middle of your pain with an awareness of who he is above that? Let that be our goal this week as we grow together and experience more of who Jesus says he is in this series. And lastly, I want to encourage you to be aware of an incredible event. This is what I was hinting at before. On May 16th, we're going to compound this series all into one night. We're going to end it on an unforgettable night of May 16th called Engage. Engage is going to be one of the most unforgettable nights of this year, and I need you to be there, okay? I need you to be there on campus. It's basically going to be a combination of one night of stretch with worship night. It's going to be the most unbelievable thing you've ever experienced. And from now till then, we're going to continue looking at these statements of Jesus, seeing what he means when he expresses who he is, so that when we encounter situations, we encounter difficulties, we can be aware of them, but we can even more so be aware of who he is to us in the middle of them. Now, as always, I love you guys. So proud of you. See you next week at 6.